So today we're going to be looking at the single pivot versus the double pivot. So firstly, very few players can perform the role of a single pivot, especially in the build phase, and managers tend to prefer a double pivot because it creates 10-yard passing lanes to the whole defensive line, and if the ball is switched, there is still an inside passing option with the opposite pivot. And it also creates a +1 in the build phase and helps defensive transitions and security. So there's three ways to create a double pivot. So firstly, if the blue team are building from the back, what may happen is one of the centre midfielders may drop down to create a double pivot in the build. The striker might drop in to create a box. And as that ball then progresses into the create phase, as the ball moves up the pitch and arrives with the front line, the centre midfielder, who was part of the double pivot, will move back up the pitch. The striker will move against the last line, and the opposite fullback may come in next to the holding midfielder to create a 3-2 structure with a back three behind, two pivots in front, and creating a front five to attack the opposition defensive line. Another way of creating the double pivot is by starting with two defensive midfielders and just playing with a number 10 between the lines. This then may be adapted that if the ball progresses from the centre back through the midfield with combinations to arrive with a 10, what may then happen is a fullback, instead of inverting deep, they invert high, which will then create a box midfield, and both half spaces are occupied. Again, a 3-2 structure is created, and we've seen Enzo Maresca do this at Chelsea this season, where Malo Gusto in particular, or Reece James, have joined the higher half spaces to create a midfield box and allow the front three to stay where they are. And finally, it is not another way to create a double pivot, but to create the same advantages of a double pivot. Some teams, particularly Liverpool at times this season, have adopted a really deep midfield three in the build phase, and this is particularly effective when you have a front three that are able to receive to feet and be able to run in behind. Because if the opposition go player for player and the midfield three are very deep and the ball can't be progressed, then there is the option of playing a more direct pass into the front three for players who are able to drop between lines, protect the ball whilst being able to execute up back through patterns where the striker may set for an out to in movement beyond the back line, or the striker may be able to turn and one of the wingers will be able to make a diagonal movement in behind for the striker to find a through ball.